Bardstown, Kentucky looks exactly like the kind of place you'd visit for a quiet weekend getaway. It's a town famous for its bourbon, its southern hospitality, and bed and breakfasts filled with cozy parlors and antique furniture. But if you book a stay at a place called the Jailer's Inn, that southern comfort stops at the hallway. Step out of the parlor, and you are immediately surrounded by 18-inch thick stone walls and solid steel doors. This building is not a replica. For exactly 168 years, right up until 1987, this property operated continuously as the Nelson County Jail. Today, tourists actively pay for the privilege of sleeping in the exact same iron bunks, locked inside the same harsh architecture where condemned inmates spent their final, desperate nights on Earth. Unsurprisingly, sleeping in a literal 19th century cell block comes with consequences. The inn is widely classified by paranormal investigators as one of the most consistently haunted locations in the United States. The phenomena reported by guests align with the documented histories of the people once locked inside these walls. The Nelson County Jail processed petty thieves, but it also held some of the country's most vicious outlaws. Even John Dillinger spent a night behind these bars while being transported north. To understand the terrifying phenomena reported by modern guests, we have to look past the ghost stories and pull the actual historical records of the men and women who died here. The disturbances often start in the dead of night. Guests abruptly wake in the pitch black to find an imposing female figure standing absolutely still, glaring down at them from the foot of their bed. This apparition matches the historical description of Mrs. McKay. She was an early jailer's wife who assumed total control of the facility after he died. Inmates praised her for providing excellent hearty meals, but if a prisoner crossed her, she instantly reduced their rations to nothing but bread and water. Running a jail in the 19th century meant dealing with a rough crowd, but the wardens themselves had surprisingly deep ties to the criminal underworld. The jailer's own family was related to notorious outlaws like Frank and Jesse James, who were known to freely visit their kin inside the facility. The terrifying wake-up calls from Mrs. McKay suggest that long after her death, the wardens of the Jailer's Inn are still actively patrolling the cell blocks. The intense surveillance doesn't stop with the matron. Down the hall is a room literally called the jail cell, sealed with a solid steel door and covered in the original desperate poetry and graffiti carved by former inmates. Guests staying in this specific room report highly aggressive auditory hauntings. Heavy iron doors clang shut on their own, the small sink lights switch off, and the unmistakable sound of a man pacing and screaming in agony echoes through the dark. A 1909 newspaper article traces those exact sounds to an inmate named Martin Hill. Around the turn of the 20th century, Hill was locked in this cell after shooting and killing his own pregnant wife in a drunken rage. Knowing the gallows were waiting for him out in the courtyard, Hill paced his cell relentlessly. But before he could face the hangman, he contracted a mysterious illness and began to physically wither away on his bunk. His condition worsened rapidly. His low moans eventually escalated into blood-curdling screams that bounced off the thick stone walls for days, right up until the moment he died, robbing the executioner of his payday. Investigators studying the site believe this specific cell acts as a spiritual trap. The intense energy holds not only Hill's tormented final moments, but also the lingering, watchful presence of the wife he murdered. Outside the claustrophobic cells, the B&B features a serene back garden where they serve morning breakfast. Yet, visitors standing out there frequently report a sudden, intense feeling of dread and the distinct sensation of being surrounded by an invisible crowd. That invisible crowd lines up perfectly with the courtyard's original purpose. This small patch of grass was the official staging ground for the Nelson County Gallows. Kentucky held the grim distinction of being the final state in the country to permit public executions. During a hanging, this yard became a literal theater of death, packed with teeming mobs of locals who perched along the tops of the stone walls just to get a better view of the spectacle. The executioners operating here worked under immense pressure. They had to mathematically calculate the rope length and the prisoner's weight to ensure a clean drop and a quick snapped neck, trying to avoid a gruesome, lingering strangulation in front of a cheering, bloodthirsty audience. The sudden anxiety guests feel over their morning coffee matches the residual psychological weight of the space. It is the lingering imprint of both a massive mob's bloodlust and a condemned man's absolute terror. So why does this specific property hold on to its ghosts? Is there a physical reason the violence and desperation of the 19th century refuses to fade from these rooms? Local paranormal investigators point straight down into the dirt. Bardstown sits directly above a massive geological network of subterranean limestone and calcite caverns, the exact same mineral deposits that make Kentucky bourbon so famous. The working hypothesis is that the calcite acts as an enormous energetic battery. Instead of dissipating over time, the intense emotional trauma generated by 168 years of continuous incarceration was passively absorbed and permanently recorded into the bedrock itself. Spending a night at the Jailer's Inn is an intimate collision with the reality of the 19th century penal system. Surrounded by the names of doomed men carved into the walls, the weight of the past becomes difficult to ignore, leaving guests to sleep in the same heavy silence as those who occupied these bunks before them.